Melanie didn't know what to do anymore. She paced back and forth, unable to calm herself. The wedding dress seemed to cause unbearable pain. It was heavy and awkward. But that wasn't the issue. Where was the groom? There were only 15 minutes left before the ceremony. Guests crowded around the registry office, waiting. Melanie had to keep her emotions in check, which was especially difficult. Melanie's friends were already exhausted, either from high heels or tedious waiting. They couldn't wait to start taking pictures and posting stories on Instagram. The photographers who were leading the ceremony were just as nervous as Melanie. They kept running up and asking if everything was all right. Time passed and Adrian was still not there. Tension was in the air, and every minute Vanessa and Nicholas's faces looked more puzzled. Is it possible to be late for your own wedding? The bride's mother was the first to speak, apparently tired of the tedious waiting. The anticipation subsided a few minutes later when an old Buick, as old as Melanie, pulled up to the registry office. The guests stared in surprise at the young man who got out of the car. He was dressed in a simple trouser suit and held a bouquet of 3 chrysanthemums in his hands. Men and women emerged from the back seat. They seemed a little younger than Melanie's parents, and their attire would have raised more questions. Clothes from a previous century. Without any embarrassment, the company began to climb the stairs. "Oh, what an interesting costume wedding," one of Melanie's guests shouted. The young man laughed and handed the bewildered Melanie the bouquet of chrysanthemums. "Hi, darling. Please excuse my lateness." The guests fell silent, watching with interest as the events unfolded. "Adrian, what is this? Please explain. Is this some kind of surprise?" It seemed like Melanie was suffocating from her tight corset. "My love, calm down. This is not a surprise, unfortunately or fortunately. This is the harsh truth of life. I fell so in love with you that I couldn't tell you the whole truth right away. I'm not rich. My parents are simple workers and I'm just a taxi driver who wants to become your beloved husband." Melanie's face flared up angrily. "Adrian, how can you joke about this? Is this a hidden camera shoot, a test to see if I can marry a poor, unfortunate groom?" "Melanie, wait. Don't look for a catch. There are no cameras here. You just professed your love to me yesterday. Has your attitude towards me really changed so quickly? Stop kidding around, Adrian. What kind of circus have you created here? Did you decide to humiliate me completely? Well, thanks, you succeeded. How did I not realize you were a fraudster from the start? No circus here." Adrian's voice was now more serious. "We were on a boat ride together. Remember you told me you wanted to live with me for the rest of your life? And at the cafe, remember I gave you an expensive watch as a gift? I bought all of that with my honestly earned money. I knew you wouldn't want a modest wedding, so I took a loan for this event." Melanie covered her face with her hands and cried silently. She couldn't imagine that the happiest day of her life would turn out to be the worst. She thought she had met a considerate, gentle, and wealthy young man. Painting her future in bright colors, she even started to do worse in university, naively thinking she wouldn't have to immediately start looking for a job after graduation, despite her parents' constant urging. The financial situation of her future groom didn't raise any questions either. Stylishly dressed, driving an expensive car, and with a flat in the most prestigious area of the city. No, Melanie didn't think she had won the lucky ticket. All of this seemed natural to her. She was from a well-to-do family and was pretty, so why not choose a partner to match? Adrian tried to embrace her, but Melanie pushed him away and said angrily, "How could you? How could you embarrass me in front of all my relatives on such a day? There will be no wedding." She turned her back on the guests and walked away. The stunned parents of the bride and groom silently looked at each other, not knowing what to do. One of the bride's friends secretly took out her phone and filmed everything that was happening. The guests stood as if petrified. It's not every day that you witness such a dramatic situation. Melanie's father was the first to come out of shock. "Daughter, come back. Everything is fine. Anything can happen between a bride and groom." But Melanie, no longer hiding her desperate state, burst into tears and ran down the sidewalk. Vanessa ran after her daughter. Nicholas sat on the steps of the registry office and lowered his head. Now all attention was focused on Adrian. He confidently handed the chrysanthemum bouquet to his parents and sat down next to Melanie's father. "How will you explain all of this?" Nicholas asked, looking Adrian straight in the eye. "You, dear Nicholas, have worked diligently all your life just like your wife. You gave your daughter the best, but one thing was missing: honesty and selflessness. What are you talking about? My daughter is an honest girl. You're the one who lied to her, took her to restaurants, drove her around in expensive cars. Why, if you couldn't afford it, why didn't you tell her yourself? I'm certain if she loved you, it wouldn't have been a problem. You could have achieved everything together with time. Why didn't we see through you, swindler? Melanie's father looked at Adrian with hatred. No one doubts your daughter's honesty. But why did she run away when she found out about my situation? I'm not a drug addict, not a drunkard, not a criminal. I earn money through honest work. Yes, the pay may not be much, but it would be enough for us to live on. And you know what? I won't justify myself anymore. I love your daughter sincerely, but today, I saw with my own eyes that she doesn't need me. She cares about money, the impressions she makes on people, but not me. Relatives stood and listened to the groom's strange confessions, but they still couldn't understand what was going on. Melanie's friends were the most perplexed. Adrian had taken her to cafes and restaurants and given her gifts. What had happened? Had he suddenly gone bankrupt, or had he been pretending to be rich all this time? Nothing was clear. No one moved from the square near the registry office, as if they were waiting for something but didn't know what. Adrian finally stood up and was about to leave. But suddenly a woman in a bright, colorful dress blocked his path. It was Melanie's aunt. "Where are you going? You think you can disgrace my niece like that and just leave? If you loved her, how could you arrange this? Look how many guests have been invited, how much effort has been put in." The woman's voice broke into a scream. "And why don't you, respectable guests, ask your beloved niece Melanie why she refused to marry a simple working guy? No benefit, so no marriage," Adrian said, noticeably getting nervous. "Is it shameful that a girl wants to do better in life? When children come, she'll have to sit on a penny during maternity leave. Is this calculation? This is called a reasonable approach. Did she deceive you about something? Was she pretending to be somebody?" Adrian wanted to argue but fell silent. Suddenly, his mother, Caitlin, approached the bride's defender and began to speak calmly. You know, Adrian didn't want to shame his future wife. He fell in love so deeply for the first time in his life, and he's not to blame for what happened. Melanie is to blame. What are you saying? Is it Melanie's fault? Of course, the mother always has a good son and the daughter-in-law is bad, Melanie's aunt retorted. "We saw Melanie with another man at the cafe a month ago," said Caitlin, stunning Nicholas and silencing the angry woman. "We were sitting with mutual friends at the cafe. Melanie didn't see us, but we overheard through the partition how she was telling the young man that she really loved him and was only marrying Adrian for his money. We couldn't keep this from our son." All the guests stood in shock at what they heard. No one expected such a turn of events. Even Adrian himself was uneasy with those words. He lightly took his mother by the elbow and tried to lead her away, but Caitlin was not going to leave. "Adrian didn't talk to us for a week and then he said he would still marry Melanie. So we convinced him to take this step, to say that he's poor. We couldn't even imagine that she would behave like that, fleeing from her own wedding. Isn't this evidence that she doesn't love our son? She only needs our money. Come on, Mom, let's go," said Adrian, taking his mother towards the car. The guests had already started to disperse, and Melanie's father still couldn't come to his senses. "How could I have raised such a daughter?" the man muttered to himself, not understanding where he was going or what he was doing. All the pleas of his loved ones that he shouldn't be upset didn't work on Nicholas. He loved Melanie very much and was already looking forward to her happy future, but everything collapsed instantly. 3 months passed since the ill-fated wedding, and incredible changes occurred in Melanie's family. Nicholas suffered a stroke that paralyzed the left side of his body. It was a shock to the family. Always active and hard-working, Melanie's father now spent almost all his time in bed. Vanessa abandoned the affairs of the store, hastily hired a new manager, and began to devote herself solely to her husband's health. Melanie was finishing her final year at university and waiting for her final exams. The gloomy series of events seemed to persist, and sales began to decline noticeably. Regular customers who once found a friendly and responsive hostess began to come in less and less. Salaries began to decline, and 2 sellers had to be fired. Only Vanessa's elderly friend and a young girl of 25 remained working in the store. She also performed the role of a cleaner, but even these 2 women barely held on. The work schedule was not designed for 2 people. After his daughter's failed marriage, Nicholas abandoned all his affairs and began to give money to anyone in debt. The man seemed to want to show all acquaintances and unfamiliar people his generosity and selflessness. But in reality, as soon as the store owner was on the brink of life and death, all the debtors disappeared. Vanessa was at a loss. She had never dealt with such matters nor had time for them now. She spent the last available money on her husband's rehabilitation. Several close relatives supported the family as best they could, but everyone had their own affairs and worries, and all the responsibility for caring for the sick Nicholas fell entirely on her shoulders. Melanie herself was never interested in parental affairs. She was busy studying at school and then at university, or there were other reasons. In fact, Nicholas and Vanessa didn't want their daughter to be involved in sales. After experiencing a difficult time in the trade industry, Melanie's parents had high hopes that their daughter would pursue a prestigious profession vastly different from their own. However, all of Melanie's plans fell apart instantly. She didn't know how to help her parents, and perhaps she didn't want to. She had no interest in taking care of her father or being involved in the family business. Melanie's close friends seemed to have vanished into thin air. She used to completely satisfy them when she was cheerful, carefree, and financially secure. But now, she was always out of money and out of time. She began acting like a victim who had been betrayed and humiliated. Many classmates continued to gossip. She thinks she's depressed and a victim, but in reality, she wanted to sit on 2 chairs, to marry a rich guy, and have an affair behind his back. It didn't work out, and everyone blamed her for her father's stroke. There was no sympathy from relatives or friends. Adrienne, who was supposed to beg for forgiveness, did not respond to calls or messages. Even her own mother had not spoken to her in days. At the end of June, Melanie finally received her university diploma. Upon arriving home, she flopped onto her bed and picked up her phone without saying a word. "Melanie, could you please go get some groceries?" her mother asked from the other room. "Don't you have anything else to say to me?" Melanie replied defiantly. "Melanie, we haven't had milk or bread in the house for 2 days. So, does that mean the bread is more important to you than your daughter's diploma? Everything was different not so long ago." Her mother emerged from the room, looking very pale. "You know, daughter, I didn't realize what a terrible person I raised. It's painful for me to accept that you're my daughter." "Wait, did you just call me a terrible person? Are you out of your mind? I just graduated and got my diploma. Why do I get an errand to the store instead of congratulations? You're almost 23 years old, yet you still think like a child. It was a huge mistake for your dad and me to indulge you and plan your wedding. So, are you going to accuse me of being dumped by Adrian now?" "Yes, I'm going to accuse you, and not just of that." Her mother spoke quietly so as not to wake her sleeping husband. "Your behavior caused your father to have a stroke and me to have a pre-heart attack condition. You started an affair knowing you were going to get married soon." "Mom, I've already explained everything to you. I had no relationship with that guy. We just met for business. I couldn't even imagine that Adrian's parents would be there. I'm telling you for the 1000th time, I didn't confess my love to that guy. I don't know why Caitlin told Dad that I did and why you believed her instead of me. The guy wrote to me on Instagram, asking if I, as a beginner designer, could advise him on choosing furniture. I naturally agreed. Experience needs to be gained, right? We met, I gave him a few tips, and he decided to thank me and invited me to our student cafe. We sat, drank coffee, and talked. He started flirting with me. I told him that I was getting married soon so that he wouldn't expect anything from me. Then he started asking me all sorts of questions like whether. He asked me if I could love him. I answered no, and started getting ready to go home. Then he asked if I could pay for myself. I told him, "Why did you invite a girl to a cafe if you don't have any money?" He started to justify himself, asking why money was so important to girls. "Is that the most important thing in life?" he asked. I told him, yes, money is important to me, and my fiancé is very wealthy, which is why I chose him. "Why did money become your top priority?" Melanie's mother asked. "We didn't raise you in poverty. You had everything you wanted." "Mom, you're being strange," Melanie replied. "Money means freedom. Yes, you can't buy everything in life with it, but a good income allows me to work and live the way I want, not like you and Daddy, who've been working from dawn till dusk in your store. If we'd been better off financially, Dad wouldn't have been so upset about the money we invested in that damn wedding." Vanessa wanted to get angry at her daughter's words but suddenly became suspiciously calm. "Your father had a stroke not because we spent a lot of money on the wedding. He was very upset to find out what kind of two-faced and selfish daughter he had." "Wow, are you accusing me again?" Melanie exclaimed. At least I was honest with Adrian. He lied to me. Either he was rich or he was poor. A decent person wouldn't present themselves like that. I value myself and don't want to marry any clowns and liars. So there's more to think about who's really two-faced and self-serving. Enough talk, Melanie, Vanessa said sternly. I won't pity you anymore. Tomorrow morning we're going to the store and you'll work as a substitute salesperson until we make a good profit. Me, a salesperson, Melanie retorted, her voice filled with disdain. I don't know how to do that. Have you asked my opinion? Melanie protested. I haven't asked and I won't ask, her mother responded sternly. You haven't even bothered to ask how much it costs to rehabilitate your father in these 2 months, how I pay the salespeople, or how I manage all of this. You only think about yourself. Vanessa put the money on the table and left the room. Melanie went to the nearby grocery store, overwhelmed with tears. She couldn't imagine being a salesperson, eating a sandwich for lunch, and gossiping with other salespeople. It felt like the end of the world had come to her young and beautiful life. She feared she would have to forget about her interior design career forever. Who would hire a recent graduate with C's in her diploma for such a serious and creative job? She needed to gain experience, but she wouldn't work for free, and she wouldn't earn decent money right away. The next day, Melanie and her mother went to the store while Aunt Polly stayed home to watch over Melanie's recovering father. The store was located at the intersection of 2 busy streets, which saved it from closing. Customers always appreciated the quality and variety of goods, but it was difficult to compete with the nearby shopping center. Its generous departments sold clothes of poor quality, but they were cheaper and in great demand. During the family meeting, it was decided to implement a system of discounts for regular customers and to consider other marketing tactics. Hello, Vanessa. How happy I am to see you, greeted Rebecca, the hostess and salesperson in their shop. Hello, Rebecca. I brought you a new employee, Vanessa pointed at Melanie. Rebecca, I have only one request for you. Treat Melanie not as my daughter but as an ordinary person who came here to learn everything. All right, we'll teach her everything, said Rebecca, smiling. Vanessa, while you are here, let me tell you that we sold all the old stock quickly, but the new models are less in demand. The fabric is natural wool, but the color is gray, slightly faded. Not everyone likes it. We haven't sold a single suit this week. Everyone is asking for classic dark gray or black. You should negotiate with the supplier and order several batches of pants and suits since they are in demand. Melanie listened in horror to her mother's conversation with the salesperson. What sizes? What wool fabric? She was a designer herself and had studied types of fabric and color combinations. But it was one thing to work in a soulless office and meet clients as necessary, and another to try to please people every day. She remembered how deeply uncomfortable she'd have felt when her mom or dad had boasted in front of every customer, turning into such caring and friendly people. The customers left with their purchases and were satisfied, but her parents came home and hardly spoke to each other. As a child, Melanie wondered why her parents were so tired. After all, they didn't have the hardest job in the world. Only years later did she understand that any job with people, if done conscientiously, is very exhausting. Is this what my mother wants to teach me, to please everyone? Melanie exclaimed, not realizing how much she still had to learn. Melanie had wandered into the men's clothing section and got lost among the shirts and sweaters. Are you choosing something for your husband? A pleasant female voice asked from behind her. You know, your beloved man would probably like this cashmere sweater. It's warm, comfortable, and cozy. We have all sizes and 5 colors to choose from. Melanie struggled to introduce herself, unsure if she should say she was the hostess's daughter or a new employee. I won't bother you. Please choose at your leisure. When you decide, let me know, and I'll come over, the salesperson said kindly. Melanie noted to herself how polite and helpful the salespeople in their store were. The girl was gorgeous and pleasant, which lifted Melanie's gloomy mood. For the first time in her life, she felt an unexpected enthusiasm to work as a salesperson. As funny as it sounded, Melanie left the men's shirt section and headed towards her mother with newfound enthusiasm. Mom, what should I do? I'm ready to work. Vanessa looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her always dissatisfied daughter was suddenly taking the initiative. Meet my daughter, Melanie. But you, Rebecca, already know her well. And you, Greta, have recently started working, and I haven't introduced you yet. The girls looked at each other and laughed. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. Rita explained to Vanessa that she had mistaken her daughter for a customer and had begun to offer her men's pullovers. Vanessa smiled, observing the interaction. She knew Melanie had a difficult character and had no illusions about her daughter's work in the store, but the accumulated fatigue over the past few months made her decide to let it be. Melanie didn't expect everything to turn out this way. Suddenly, she became a seller of plus-size clothes. Surprisingly, she felt a surge of strength and energy. Melanie pushed all unnecessary thoughts out of her head and started to learn about sales. These are single-breasted jackets, these are double-breasted, and these are buccal fabric jackets. They used to be insanely popular with us, Rita explained to Melanie in the women's clothing department. What's the maximum size for these jackets? Melanie asked, showing surprise. We always order tunics and dresses in certain models up to XXL, Rita replied. Melanie's face showed bewilderment. Really? I didn't think plus-size clothes were popular. Well, your parents are smart people and wouldn't deal with selling outdated things. Think about it, the sizes of fashionable dresses, blouses, and skirts end at size L, but women of any weight want to look elegant and modern. And men too. We have many regular customers who don't want to lose weight but want to dress fashionably. Melanie nodded, absorbing the information. For the first time, she understood the importance of their store's mission to provide stylish clothing for all body types. It was a revelation that sparked a genuine interest in her new role. It's not our business why they live like that, Greta said. Our task is to satisfy their needs. There are few places in town where you can find clothes that are both high quality and fashionable in those sizes. Of course, online stores are our competition, but when people come to us, we don't just sell them something heartlessly. We learn about their desires and try to offer options. Yes, our main task is to sell, and there's nothing wrong with that. But who, if not a seller, will suggest to our buyers what suits them, what to wear with it, how to combine it? Rita pointed to the women's clothing section. Look, this is a dress with a basque. It seems like just a decorative detail, but it balances the proportions between a normal waist and wide hips. Or this dress. Pick a bright scarf, shoes, and a bag, and it will look completely different. Melanie listened with her mouth open, realizing she had underestimated the work of a clothing store seller and slightly overestimated herself. Rita wasn't telling her anything fundamentally new. Melanie knew about cuts and combinations of clothes. But Greta opened up a new world when she talked about interacting with customers, how to please them so they leave satisfied, even if they don't buy anything. I like working here, really, Greta shared with Melanie during lunch. I have a lot of respect for your mother. Not every store owner would sell their jewelry to pay their employees. Yeah, my mom is a strange woman, Melanie managed to say, thinking to herself, Mom didn't say a word about selling her jewelry. Why do I find out everything from strangers? Melanie thought, a pang of guilt washing over her. She hadn't even noticed that her mother no longer wore earrings or a ring. I'm a terrible daughter. I can't learn properly, earn money, or get married. From that day on, Melanie didn't just work part-time at the family store. She started trying harder than ever. She worked alongside Greta for several days and Rebecca for several days, only taking one day off per week. Melanie served customers in the store, sorted and steamed clothes in the warehouse, dressed mannequins, and monitored the size grid of the most popular models. But most importantly, she took on the responsibility of promoting the store on the internet. A task Vanessa had previously managed alone. Though she didn't understand marketing or PR, her strong desire to revive the family business outweighed her doubts. She began actively maintaining the store's social media page, posting photos of clothing, describing product characteristics, and answering customer questions. Vanessa saw how hard her daughter was trying, how politely she communicated with customers, and how she mastered the intricacies of working with the cash register. Despite all the recent hardships, Vanessa was pleased to see this belated maturity in her daughter. Melanie no longer sent endless voice messages to her friends, endlessly scrolled through her news feed, or snorted at every request. She spent her only day off with her father. Vanessa regretted insisting on Melanie's hasty marriage, not letting her date properly, and not getting to know Adrian's parents. The marriage had seemed like the perfect solution to make her daughter more serious. She had thought that responsibility for a family, and later a child, would bring maturity. She realized now how wrong she had been. A person can only change themselves or be changed by circumstances. Several more months passed, and Nicholas began to regain movement on the left side of his body. Full recovery was still a long way off, but this progress brought incredible happiness to the family. The efforts of the doctors and Vanessa's care had paid off. Vanessa was thrilled but couldn't help but wonder if Melanie would have changed for the better without the misfortune that had struck their family. One Monday, Melanie and Greta were working at the store. The morning was slow, with no customers yet. The girls were picking out outfits for the mannequins and laughing. "Hello, girls," an elderly woman walked into the store and smiled sweetly. "Hello," the salespeople answered almost in unison. "It's so good that you open at 9. I've had insomnia for a few nights," the woman said. "I woke up at 5 in the morning, unsure of what to do with myself. I decided to go for a walk to clear my mind and find what I needed to calm down." "What would make you feel better? A blouse, a dress, or a warm cardigan?" Rita approached a customer not far from where I stood. "I have a dilemma. I need to pick out a dress for a wedding. Size XXL. I looked yesterday nearby, but they only had dark colors." The woman nodded towards the neighboring shopping center. "Please tell me what kind of dress styles you usually wear, what you'd like to show off, and what to cover up." The elderly woman chuckled. "Oh, girls your age want to show everything. You're young and slim, but at my age, it's better to cover up. I want something light and pleasant. It's my grandson's wedding. If you find a dress with a light wrap, I'll be delighted." The saleswoman proceeded to show the elderly woman all the elegant dresses in her size available in the store. The shopper examined each one with keen interest, knowing the process would take some time. "So, your grandson's wedding is coming up soon. Is the bride pretty?" I joined in the conversation, hoping to make her feel more comfortable. "Still 3 weeks until the celebration, but I like to have everything ready in advance. My grandson's name is Adrian. As for the bride, I haven't seen her yet. I only arrived 3 days ago," she replied warmly. "I live far from here. My son bought me a plane ticket and said, 'Mom, come celebrate your grandson's wedding and stay with us for a month.' So, here I am," the woman explained. She tried on several dresses but couldn't decide which suited her best. "Girls, I've already troubled you enough. I'm sorry, but I hadn't bought anything for myself in so long. There aren't many occasions to dress up in old age. My son told me the wedding will be grand. The bride is from a very wealthy family," she sighed. "We're not rushing you at all, Mrs. Sullivan," Melanie smiled reassuringly. "It's good that the bride is well off. Hopefully, there will be fewer problems in married life." "Oh dear, money is not always a guarantee of a happy marriage. My son, for example, used to be calm and reasonable, but now I don't understand what's happening to him. He's become nervous and agitated. His wife squeezes everything out of him for a luxurious life. Caitlin loves going to the most expensive resorts and wearing expensive clothes. But one good thing is my grandson is a decent guy. He helps his father in business and does what he can," Mrs. Sullivan reflected, her gaze clouded with concern. "I'll take this one," Mrs. Sullivan decided suddenly, looking at herself in the mirror. "The pink color refreshes well, and the fabric is pleasant to the touch." Melanie felt a pang of sorrow overwhelm her, and the elderly woman looked at her with concern. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked gently. Melanie couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "I'm sorry, just tired," she managed to say between sobs. "Don't cry, dear. You'll have your own celebration in life, and you'll get married," Mrs. Sullivan comforted her. "You know, I was supposed to have a wedding, but it fell through because of me," Melanie continued tearfully, finding solace in the elderly woman's warmth. Mrs. Sullivan took Melanie's hand gently. "Don't cry. Let's finish processing my purchase, and then we'll go outside, and you can tell me everything." 10 minutes later, Melanie was pouring her heart out to Adrian's grandmother, recounting the unfortunate events of that day. She spoke of her father's stroke, her mother's dedication to caring for him, and her own role working in the store to support her parents. "My dear, to say that I'm shocked is an understatement," Mrs. Sullivan said softly. "I am very sorry about your father. But tell me honestly, did you really cheat on Adrian?" "No, of course not," Melanie replied desperately. "I'm telling you all this not because I want to get Adrian back, but it's too late. He's getting married. I'm just upset that I was slandered in front of all my relatives, friends, and especially my father, who couldn't bear such shame," Melanie confessed, her voice tinged with regret. "My parents always saw me as not serious, and I couldn't convince them that I didn't confess my love to a stranger. It was just some idiotic coincidence," she continued, frustration evident in her tone. I agreed to meet with someone who needed my advice as a designer. I didn't see anything wrong with that. Why would I go to the most popular cafe in our city if I were a cheater just before the wedding? Melanie explained. What's it called? Mrs. Sullivan asked. It's just called Pizza. It opened a year ago, serves delicious food at reasonable prices. We call it the Student Cafe because there are always plenty of students there, Melanie replied. Melanie, do you still love Adrian? Mrs. Sullivan unexpectedly changed the subject. I think I love him, although right now I'm giving that word a slightly different meaning. I know you'll ask me why I ran away from the wedding if I loved him. You see, I was preparing myself for a happy married life with a man I liked. I won't lie that Adrian was a wealthy guy, Melanie admitted. I thought that if I married him, I would become financially independent of my parents and live as I please. Before my father's incident, we had no problems with money, but my mom and dad constantly talked about how I would have to work hard in the future to become a real professional and live without worries. Now I understand that my parents were right about everything, but back then, I just imagined that half of my life would be spent achieving that, while there were so many other interesting and new things around me. Your grandson came to the wedding like a jester, saying he was completely broke and that we would live on his salary as a taxi driver. I just didn't expect such a turn of events. I had told everyone about my smart, beautiful, and well-off fiancé, and then this happened, Melanie lamented. I understand that in your eyes, I am a foolish, selfish person who wanted to settle better in life. Let it be that way, but I'm just too tired. Melanie sighed, overwhelmed by her thoughts. Melanie, how many thoughts are running through your head? But believe me, the most important thing is that you realize your problem. We all make mistakes, Mrs. Sullivan comforted her. My son Brandon, a successful entrepreneur, a self-sufficient man, is under his wife's thumb, and he didn't say a word to me about this story. But you know, Melanie, our conversation with you is not over yet. Let's meet tomorrow morning. I think my legs led me to your store for a reason, she said to Melanie. Melanie bid farewell to Adrian's grandmother and returned to work, feeling an unprecedented relief filling her soul. Suddenly, someone called her by name. A handsome stranger pulled up too close to the sidewalk in his car and gestured for Melanie to sit in the front seat. Melanie ignored him and continued on her way. The stranger jumped out of the car and ran up to Melanie. Hey Melanie, do you remember me? He greeted her. Hello, no, I don't remember you. What do you want? Melanie replied sharply. Wow, calm down. Why so gloomy in the morning? I just came to talk to you. I'm one of Adrian's friends. My name is Marcus. I was late for your wedding, he explained. Adrian told me everything that happened. I've been writing to you on social media, but you don't respond, so I had to catch you on the street. Do you know that Adrian is getting married soon? I'm happy for him, Melanie answered indifferently. But he doesn't love his fiancée. His mother is forcing him to marry this girl. Things aren't going well for his father in business, and Crystal is the daughter of a big shot in our administration. He seemed to like her at first, so she's a pretty girl. But he talks to her for a while and realized they didn't have any common ground. He isn't glad he agreed to this wedding himself, Marcus explained urgently. Well, there's nothing I can do to help. Let him put on the same show with her as she did with me, and maybe she'll get off him on her own, Melanie replied coldly. Melanie, I'm serious. You have to tell Adrian that you still love him and there will be no wedding. He's setting the trap for himself, and I just want to save him, Marcus pleaded. Why do you think I still love him and should save him from such a good, advantageous match? And do you think I'll believe both of you, especially Adrian, who played a prank at our wedding? This is not a joke, Marcus. Goodbye, Melanie retorted firmly, turning around and heading back towards the store. Melanie, Marcus called after her. Do you even know how much Adrian is suffering because of what happened? He's proud. He just can't call you himself. He knows he's to blame. A man is the master of his own destiny, Melanie loudly declared, speaking the first phrase that came to her mind, and walked even faster. Caitlin, dear, make me some tea, please. I feel like drinking something, Mrs. Sullivan said, sitting in the spacious kitchen, spreading butter on a piece of bread. I will, but it's just wonderful how you do everything yourself, and now you're asking me to do it, Mrs. Sullivan remarked, a hint of admiration in her voice. Caitlin, you know, I wanted someone to take care of me like they do in a cafe. I'd only go to such places rarely, there's not much variety in my small town, Melanie replied thoughtfully. So what's stopping you from going to a cafe or restaurant? Brandon and I often go to such places, Mrs. Sullivan suggested. You're probably right. There's a woman living in the house across from you who recommended going to a cafe. What's it called? Oh, I remember, just pizza. She said it's tasty and cheap. Do you think it's worth going there? Melanie asked. I'm shocked by such advice. It's a youth cafe, there's constant noise, and the staff is rude. No, definitely not, Mrs. Sullivan advised firmly. Have you been there, Caitlin? Melanie inquired. I've been there once, Caitlin confirmed. Thanks for the advice, dear, but now I'm going for a walk, Melanie decided, heading towards the door. Mom, where are you going? Brandon asked as he saw his mother leaving. Yes, Sonny, I am. Could you please drive me? It's nearby, Mrs. Sullivan requested. Under his wife's watchful eye, Brandon and his mother left the apartment. Mom, I'm starving. I was planning to have some lunch at home, Brandon stated nervously. Don't worry, son. You'll eat in 10 minutes. I came up with an excuse to talk to you face to face for once. Let's sit on that bench over there, Mrs. Sullivan said, leading him to a nearby bench. I know what this is, Mom. As a former senior investigator, you're going to interrogate me, Brandon joked uneasily. I used to joke about that, but now it's true. The future of your only son and my only grandchild depends on it. So, tell me, why did you ruin Adrian and Melanie's wedding? Mrs. Sullivan asked directly. What are you talking about, Mom? You know that Melanie refused to marry Adrian when he told her that he was poor and worked as a taxi driver, Brandon explained, frustrated. But that's not all. She was also flirting with a stranger behind Adrian's back before the wedding. We saw and heard everything, Mrs. Sullivan revealed. And what? A coincidence that you and Caitlin, regulars in expensive restaurants, decided to go to such a cheap youth cafe. Brandon countered, surprised. Yes, Mom, I was really surprised to go to such a place, but I didn't say anything, Brandon admitted. And what a coincidence that you were lucky enough to find 2 free tables in a crowded cafe, Mrs. Sullivan pressed on. Yes, Mom, we saved our son from that lying girl, and now he's marrying a good girl from a decent and well-off family. I'll be pleased to be related to her father, Brandon defended his actions. Why are you so worried and stressed all the time, Brandon? Your mother is still alive, and your son is marrying a good girl. Yet you're on pins and needles. Tell me the truth, Mrs. Sullivan urged. Well, if you want to know the truth, then here it is. I invested a large sum of money into a business and lost it. We barely have enough money to cover the debts, and the wedding is ahead. Everything is difficult, Brandon confessed. Why did you give your son an expensive wedding in this difficult time and put yourself in even greater debt? Wouldn't Adrian have understood your situation? Mrs. Sullivan questioned, concerned. No, Mom. Caitlin believes that if we have a grand wedding, then Nicholas, Crystal's father, will treat us better in the future, Brandon explained. Don't ruin your own life or your child's life. It won't end well. It's better to cure your addiction to Caitlin, who plays you like a puppet. By the way, I accidentally met Melanie yesterday. She works as a salesperson at her parents' store, Mrs. Sullivan revealed. I can see through people, and I can assure you that she is an honest girl who just got a little confused, Mrs. Sullivan asserted. Well, Mom, I don't even want to listen, Brandon retorted, already heading towards the door. Wait, Mrs. Sullivan called after him. She explained to me why she reacted like that and ran away. You know, if your father had surprised me like that, I would have at least hit him with a frying pan. Besides, Melanie's father just started recovering from the stroke he got after your mess. If you're saving your money, make it a prenuptial agreement instead of a circus. I heard that Melanie's father is in bad condition, and I am very sorry for that. But Adrian offered him money for expenses, and he refused. We decided that it would be a good lesson for our son to find out who is with you because of money and who is with you because of love. Maybe you shouldn't do such a test for your Caitlin. Yesterday, I saw a check that fell out of her purse. She bought herself another leather coat. So now I understand why you have problems with money. I could live off that amount for half a year. Mom, let's end this conversation. Stop accusing us. Adrian's wedding will still take place. He's busy preparing for the celebration. Yes, I see. He's preparing so much that he's become pale in front of his laptop. He doesn't even have time to eat. Mom, he's an IT specialist. That's why he doesn't leave his computer. Okay, do what you know. Go eat, we'll talk tonight. When Brandon left, Mrs. Sullivan called a taxi and went straight to the store to meet Melanie. She shared her suspicions and convinced Melanie to meet again with the guy whom, according to Caitlin, she had confessed her love to. Initially hesitant, Melanie eventually agreed after an hour of heartfelt conversation with the persuasive investigator. She realized the meeting could shed light on a serious moral dilemma, one that could influence not only Mrs. Sullivan's family but possibly her own future as well. Receiving the call from Melanie confirming the meeting was set, Mrs. Sullivan gathered Brandon, Caitlin, and Adrian in the living room. My dear ones, tomorrow marks exactly 45 years since I started working in the police. That's why I want to invite you to a restaurant and celebrate it, Mrs. Sullivan announced warmly. The next day, the family gathered at a cozy cafe, enjoying various delicacies with heartfelt conversations flowing freely. Mrs. Sullivan shared stories about Brandon's childhood, her experiences as a detective, and anecdotes that brought laughter and nostalgia to the table. As the evening progressed and drinks were poured, Caitlin, suddenly curious, asked her mother-in-law, "Tell me, where did you get the money for this restaurant? It's a very exquisite and expensive place." Mrs. Sullivan, with dignified composure, replied, "Don't worry, Caitlin dear. We're spending my hard-earned money. I have a good pension and thanks to my son's regular help, I have saved a decent sum in the bank. This money will be enough for Brandon to pay off his debt and for Adrian not to marry a girl he doesn't love whom you picked out for him." Adrian almost choked on his cocktail when he heard those words. He had only shared his doubts about marriage with his close friend. How could his grandmother know all this? Brandon was stunned by his mother's candor and didn't know what to say. "Caitlin, I've been living on this earth for many years, and I immediately realized that someone was putting pressure on my son and Adrian. Some people like to solve their problems at the expense of others, but that's not your option, grandson. I'm sure you're an honest person, but you're influenced by your mother, who doesn't deny herself the purchase of a 25th Himalayan goat fur coat when there are problems in the family." "How dare you speak to me like that?" Caitlin stood up and threw her crumpled napkin on the table. "Sit down and calm down, Caitlin," Mrs. Sullivan commanded. "Melanie, come here." To everyone's surprise, Melanie and an unknown man appeared. "I invited guests to our wonderful celebration," continued Mrs. Sullivan, "a celebration of truth, honesty, and justice, Caitlin. Don't you want to tell us how you arranged the meeting between this young man and Melanie, how you booked 2 tables, and how you brought Brandon here?" Caitlin looked at her mother-in-law and the young man, seemingly ready to take a desperate step. Adrian stared at Melanie intently, overwhelmed with shame. How could he have believed his mother's words and become involved in this shameful adventure? Unexpectedly, the unknown young man spoke up first. "I'm very sorry this happened," he said, looking at Adrian and Brandon with sad eyes. "I just needed money." And then Caitlin suggested earning some extra cash by provoking emotions and extra words from Melanie. "I would never have come here and kept this a secret if Melanie hadn't said that her father had a stroke after the shock at the wedding. Forgive me." He lowered his eyes to the floor and left the cafe. Melanie stood silently crying behind Mrs. Sullivan's back. "But why?" Brandon's voice broke the long silence. "Why did you lie to everyone, Caitlin? Why did you convince everyone that our son's bride was a traitor? And when Adrian didn't believe it, you suggested such a nasty way of testing. How could I have signed up for all this nonsense? I don't want to see you anymore." "Wait, don't jump to conclusions," Melanie exclaimed, rushing to the table as if struck by lightning. "Don't argue because of me. I'm not worthy of such sacrifice. Adrian, I'm sorry. I didn't appreciate you as I should have. I just didn't expect such a test on my own wedding day." The girl wiped away her tears and headed for the exit. Adrian immediately jumped from the table and ran after her. "Forgive me, Melanie," Adrian pleaded, catching up to her. "Forgive me for believing my mother's words about you like a fool. Let's go talk." Melanie and Adrian left the cafe, leaving Brandon, his mother, and Caitlin sitting at the table in silence. "I should buy plane tickets and leave immediately according to the genre's laws," Caitlin said remorsefully. "However, since I live far away, please bear with me for a couple more weeks. I swear that I don't want to be the cause of your family's breakdown. You may hate me and curse me however you want. It's your right, but please understand, feelings and people's destinies aren't a joke, and I'm not just talking about Melanie and Adrian." "Why did you tell me all this now?" Brandon asked his mother. "There was no reason then. And now the time has come." "I'm sorry. I've completely lost control of myself," Caitlin exclaimed, tears flowing down her cheeks. "Everything will be fine," Mrs. Sullivan said, taking Brandon and Caitlin's hands and joining them together. Let's approach the table and ask for the bill. As they prepared to settle the tab, a tall figure of Adrian appeared from behind. I have 2 pieces of news for you, dear parents and Grandma Pardon, the senior investigator for heart cases. Let me start with a good one. My carefully chosen bride, Crystal, is leaving to study in London, so the wedding is cancelled, by the way, according to her wish. The second news is even better. Melanie and I want to get married again, this time for sure. I clarify, precisely get married, not have an outrageously expensive wedding. Who's in favor? Adrian asked, raising both hands with a grin. Brandon, Caitlin, and Grandma joined in, raising their hands without a word, and laughter filled the room. Finally, there was complete mutual understanding in their home.